Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Fresky. I'm the Engagement Director with the Financial Access Initiative at New York University. I'm here to talk to you today about how we and others have used financial diaries data to tell stories, what it takes to tell a good story, and why this matters to you as a researcher with the Small Firm Diaries project. Stories are very powerful. Humans have been using them to communicate ideas and values and lessons for tens of thousands of years. So, what is a story? At a very basic level, a story is simply a sequence of events in which one or more protagonists interact with their world. Events and actions lead to other events and actions, choices are made, conflicts and tensions arise, and sometimes they are resolved. But stories can be more effective than facts, statistics, and explanations in influencing how people think and how they behave. Why is that? Well, our brains respond differently to stories than they do to these other kinds of information. Stories appeal to us on an emotional level and wedge deeply in our minds. Storytelling helps listeners understand the essence of complex concepts in meaningful and often personal ways. And storytelling is naturally interactive. When there's some kind of mystery in a story or a point of tension, listeners naturally try to figure out what will happen next, which makes them an active participant in making sense of the situation. Another way of saying this is that when we hear a story, it's a natural human instinct to try to relate it to our own experience. But not all stories are the same, of course. Some stories are more memorable, compelling, and more effective than others. So we'll talk in this presentation about some ways that you as researchers can help us tell better stories using the financial diaries data. We'll look at some examples of financial diary storytelling. We'll talk about the elements of good storytelling, and we'll look more closely at the story of Pumsa, who is a sheep intestine seller in Cape Town, South Africa. First, let's step back and talk about why we're talking about storytelling, how it fits into the Small Firm Diaries project, and how storytelling will be a big part of the success of this project. So our goal with the Small Firm Diaries is ultimately to help people, just like the ones that you will be interviewing, achieve their goals in life, whether that be to hire more employees to expand their business or simply to make enough money through their business so that they can pay for healthcare or school supplies for their kids or whatever their basic needs are in life. We believe that one way we can do that is through making sure they have more access to financial training, tools, and services that are better suited to their real needs. So in this project, we're going to try to tell true stories about the people that we meet. And this means, of course, that we need accurate and complete data, but also the details to tell stories. So while your primary job is to make sure that the data we gather is accurate and complete, you also help the project a lot in collecting the details to tell these stories. Now, these stories, used along with the accurate data you're collecting, will show us the dilemmas that people are facing, how they make financial decisions, and what kinds of products, tools, or services might help them do better. In this way, the stories will help inform the design of financial services, be they microloan programs or insurance products or mobile money plans or business training programs that are better suited to the real needs of these firm owners. And better tools, services, and training programs will help people to stay in business, hire more employees, become more productive, become more profitable, so that they can achieve their goals in life, whatever those may be. You've already heard Jonathan Morduck, the Executive Director of the Financial Access Initiative, talk in a separate video about past financial diaries research and the importance of individual stories. Here are a few more examples. On the top right, you can see the book Portfolios of the Poor, written by Jonathan Morduck and other co-authors, which told stories about families in India, Bangladesh, and South Africa. There's a photo in the bottom center of the Hrishipara Diaries, run by a scholar named Stuart Rutherford, along now with Lyft, which has been following families in Bangladesh for over 5 years. With the US Financial Diaries on the bottom right, the Financial Access Initiative, along with other collaborators, took the diaries methodology to the United States. There are financial diaries in Kenya. The bottom left shows the Garment Worker Diaries, which follows the lives of garment workers in Bangladesh, produced by Microfinance Opportunities. And several financial diary studies conducted by Lyft, including What Women Want in Myanmar, Financial and Energy Diaries in Uganda, and Youth Livelihood Diaries in Uganda and Ghana, along with many others. So these stories come in many formats, from books to blog posts, photos, videos, and many different formats. And I wanted to point out also that the Small Firm Diaries project is unique and that it will be the first to use diaries at this scale to illuminate the financial lives of small businesses rather than households or individuals. Earlier, we said that not all stories are the same and that some are more memorable, compelling, and effective than others. So what sets a good story apart? First, a good story contains specific, memorable details about people's lives. For the reader to feel a connection to the people in our study, it's important that they can see, hear, feel, taste, even smell the world that we're describing. Second, a good story always contains an element of tension or suspense. If the reader can always predict what's going to happen in the end and never feels any suspense about what might happen, then it's probably not a very memorable story. In a good story, the protagonists face difficult dilemmas and choices that are not obvious or easy. This sounds quite simple, but in fact, it is perhaps the most important part of this presentation and is also related to the third point, that a good story helps the reader understand the motivation behind people's decisions. So when people do face these difficult choices in running their business, a good story helps us understand why they made one choice over another. Relatedly, it's important that we know and understand through these stories how people really do act, as opposed to how we imagine that they might act or think that they should act. Fourth and finally, a good story shifts between a narrow lens and a wide lens. So if you think about this metaphor of using a camera that can zoom in and out, a researcher assigned to a small number of businesses may naturally have a narrow lens to zoom in on and understand those individual business owners and take in the specific memorable details of their lives and their cash flows. But it's also important to zoom out and take into account their whole context and their relationships, how they relate to other people, communities, institutions, and support services. So this is to say that to tell a complete story about why things happen, it's important to notice not just the individuals, but the relationships that they have with other people in their families and their communities. Now we'll quickly look at the story of Pumsa from the book Portfolios of the Poor to illustrate some of these elements we were just talking about and see how they can fit together. So number one, Pumsa is a sheep intestine seller living in the crowded urban hostels of Cape Town. She supports herself and 4 children with her business. Every day she buys intestines, cooks them on an outside fire between the hostel building, and sells them to passersby. Note here the specific memorable details. She's not a food vendor, but rather a sheep intestine seller. It doesn't say she has kids, but rather that she has 4 children. It even tells you how she prepares the intestines on an outside fire between the hostel buildings. Details like this allow the reader to feel a connection to Pumsa and see and hear and feel and understand the world that she lives in. Number 2, she tries not to give credit to customers, knowing it will hurt her cash flow, but she broke this rule 5 times during the year for special customers. Here is a very short illustration of a difficult choice that Pumsa is faced with. That is, should she help out customers who can't afford to pay, and an insight into how she thinks about this decision. While she knows that giving credit will cause a dip in her cash flow, she's willing to do this to retain a few special customers a few times a year. Number 3, on average, she earns revenues of about $6 to $15 a day from this business. Government-provided child support grants of $25 a month supplements this income, so this family of 5 lives on a monthly income of about $120. This shows how the quantitative data that you all are collecting contributes to this picture of Pumsa and giving a very precise and accurate picture of her financial life. Number 4, these figures show that Pumsa isn't in the poorest of households. This is a very short example of the wide lens. The story doesn't only focus on Pumsa as an individual, but gives us information about how her struggles compare to those of other people in her community or in her country. And finally, number 5, South African women in the study joined several bi-monthly savings clubs in spite of having bank accounts that would have paid them interest on their savings. They found that the extra discipline the clubs provided was valuable in itself because it compelled them to save no matter what. This passage actually combines several of the elements we talked about in the last section. It contributes to the wide lens, showing PUMSA's relationship with community members, that is her friends in the savings club, and institutions, the bank. It shows a choice that PUMSA faces. Is it better to save with a bank account or her savings clubs? And it illuminates the reason behind her decision to use savings clubs, even though they cost more, because they give her the discipline to stick to her savings goals. Now, these are a few necessarily quick examples, but please do ask your trainers and supervisors about ways to access other financial diary stories to look at them in greater depth. This is the last slide in the training. This is where we talk about how you will help us collect the details that make up the stories in the course of your job as a researcher. During the interviews, keep your eyes and ears wide open and notice which firms are most open and transparent, wanting to share their full story with us. Notice common patterns and similarities in how firms behave. What are they struggling with? What takes up their time? What do they complain about? When a firm seems to be doing something different than others, make sure to follow up, confirm the differences, and ask why. Notice not just what the firms do, but also what they don't do, especially if they tell you they're going to do something and then they don't do it. Notice also when you see firms having to make difficult decisions and decisions that they are uncertain about. After your interviews, take note of all of these things. Write down your thoughts and observations. Talk to other field researchers in your biweekly meetings. Talk to other field researchers in your biweekly meetings about all of the above things that you are noticing. And also talk to your supervisor on WhatsApp and bring these to his or her attention. So this is the end of the small firm diary storytelling training. We've talked about the power of storytelling to influence thinking and behavior. We've talked about the elements of a good story. And we have looked at how these elements can come together in an example like the story of PUMSA. Finally, we talked about ways that you can help us tell true stories about business owners as you are going about your data collection interviews. I really hope you enjoyed the training and wish you good luck.